Together can we do it? Yes, we can.
Each man must do his bit.
Welcome to another edition of The Public Interest. My name is David Granger, and on this series of programs, we examine issues of public interest. And in this program, particularly, we want to look briefly at the question of violence. Where does violence come from? Is Guyana a violent country? Uh, I start by asking a question which has been bothering us over the last 2 years or so. Why were three school children, aged 13, 14, and 15, injured and had to be rushed to hospital after their school bus was stolen by a PPP mob in broad daylight on Friday, the 6th of March 2020, on the Bushlat Public Road in Region 5, that's West Belize? What did those children do to deserve such violence? When did this country of ours descend to such a depth of depravity? These are questions that we as ordinary citizens must ask ourselves. And many people seem to be afraid to speak about 6th of March. But here we're speaking about adults, and we're speaking of children traveling in a bus, which was clearly identified. This is was 12 on a school day, and we have children being rushed to hospital. What did they do? And how did such a violent um, episode, occur in that community? My friends, civil violence against innocent children, such as that which was displayed on March 2020, note the date, should be examined from a political perspective. And allow me, I'm not attempting to embark on a history lesson, but uh, we became independent in May 1966 in a state of emergency. Ghana was actually in a state of emergency. There were British troops actually on Guyanese soil on the 26th of May 1966. 13 years earlier, the British government had expelled the elected government and it suspended the constitution. And of course, in 1953 October, they sent in the British Army. Well, the British Army stayed there till 1966, 13 years. Of course, over the years, they were rotated. And all about 18 regiments came to Guyana. Many marriages um, were concluded in that period. But it must be remembered that they came here in what we call basically peacekeeping duties. And we need to understand what occurred in that period between 1953, October 1953 to October 1966. After the suspension of the Constitution, a civil disobedience campaign started, and I'm not going to go into all of the events, but the most spectacular was that on the voice of Queen Victoria, her head was blown off. Um, and, as you know, the statue later moved to the Botanical Gardens, and the PPP administration restored the statue to the plinth in front of the Supreme Court building, and it is still there. But the first damage done during that campaign of civil disobedience after the suspension of the Constitution. How does civil disobedience occur. It occurs when citizens set out to injure or kill others, or to destroy property, or to prevent other people from taking certain actions. And in Guyana, we've seen that over the years, civil violence has arisen out of economic, out of ethnic, and and most frequently out of electoral disputes, um, and of course the allegation of discrimination. But the economic, ethnic, and electoral problems have been the causes of much of the civil violence that we've seen over the years. I wouldn't go back to pre-independence period more. I'll mention this a little bit. In my view, civil violence is not instinctive. I don't feel that people are instinctively violent. I think civil violence is an invention. People invent violence in order to get some advantage. Um, in the 1920s, it was a deliberate response to the British government's suspension of the Constitution. And in the 1960s, violence was a response to the decision of the British government to introduce a new electoral system. That's in 1964. Well, that was the year in which the PPP launched a campaign of violence. And if you go to history books, particularly the one by Dr. Granger himself, he described that campaign as a hurricane of protest. Well, at the end of the hurricane, over 180 people were dead. That was the damage done by that hurricane of protest. The hurricane or the violence was perpetrated under the guise of a strike in the industry by the Guyana Agricultural and Federal Workers Union. Well, at that time, it was called the Guyana Agricultural Workers Union, GAU. But they were central to the civil violence in 1964. Scores of people were killed, most of them innocent. And most spectacularly, the British governor, Sir Richard Lee, because at that time we were a colony, we were British Guyana, and on the 13th of June, 1964, he ordered the detention without trial of 32 members of the PPP and 3 members of the PNC. 32 members of the PPP were detained without trial because of their role in civil violence in 1964. Eventually, as you know, elections were held in December 64, and under the PNC-UF coalition, peace was restored. We should know from our study of Ghanaian history that there was violence in election campaign, not only in 1964, that was the worst case in which the PDP tried to stop the election. Maybe on another occasion we can examine how that violence unfolded. But in 1973, there was an attempted violence. As you know, some people who were trying to do something unlawful were shot. In 1997, there was violence. In 2001, there was violence. And of course, in the wake of that election, there was violence for a long period, almost for a decade. And of course, there was violence in 2022, yeah, particularly in West Coast Police on the 6th of March, when those innocent school children, 13, 14, and 15, were stoned while traveling in a school bus. Who could be traveling in a school bus? It was children, not terrorists, no, not criminals, children. And they were stoned and injured. Yeah. So we look at the focal point of civil violence over the years. And it would seem that at the time of elections, the polarization of forces tend to explode in, into violence. And let me say this, on the morning of the 3rd of August 2020, Guyana woke up to peace. The APN have seen never engaged violence. The violence we had in 2020 was a PPP invention on 6th of March. There were 6 riots countrywide on the quarantine in the East Angie, West Berbice, and the APN KFC never got involved in violence in 2020. Bear that in mind. What we see, therefore, my friends, is that the deadly disturbances of the mid-1960s was followed by a more deadly outbreak of violence, which I call the problems in the early 2000s. And this violence, civil violence, has left a lingering legacy of distrust. And sometimes it seems that violence is just below the surface, and any any spark could ignite a conflagration. We must therefore understand the nature of violence, and as citizens, seek to prevent or violence, which not only harm one another, but there's a lingering legacy which I call the secondary impact. Children growing up in violent communities. Think of those 3 children in Fort Wellington Secondary School. They'll remember the violence for the rest of their lives. Other persons, the families, their parents who witness it will remember that. So there will be an impact. The trouble of the early 2000s, many children, point to holes in their in the walls of their home. Going to school, they'd see a dead body or something floating in the trench. So they're never far away from us. And that violence that was perpetrated in um, in the early 2000s has an impact because the children who were, you know, 6 years old in 2000 are now 26 years old. They're now mature men and women. So the memories haven't gone away with their childhood and their adolescence. Memories should be with them. It therefore means that the central government, society as a whole, must examine the causes of that violence. And what I would say, the violence continues largely because the state has been ambivalent about violence. It's ambivalent about extrajudicial killings. And two of the most recent disturbances, civil disturbances, have been about extrajudicial killings on the East Demerara and on the uh, Pomeroon Suriname coast, Region 2. We know that very well. And the state must not be ambivalent about these extrajudicial killings by the police. Every occasion after August 2020 that the police have acted forcefully has resulted in some other resistance and, and some civil violence. We need to examine the attitude and the capacity of law enforcement agencies. We need to determine whether there's been political interference in policing and whether there's been reluctance to introduce and implement reasonable remedial action once we discover what the problem is. Civil violence can be eliminated, but only by dealing decisively with criminality. Once there is a general tolerance of criminality, we will find that tolerance will lead to um, some form of encouragement for criminals. For example, backtracking. Backtracking is a guiding stroke, but it's illegal. And I remember the present president of Suriname, he used to be the Minister of Justice, and I remember Guyanese were trying to persuade them to ignore the backtracking. It's a crime, it's unlawful. That was Mr. Santoki's response when he was in President Bouterse's cabinet years ago. So once we have law enforcement agencies um, which ignore or tolerate backtracking, ignore bribery and corruption, ignore extrajudicial killing, ignore gold smuggling, ignore gun running, ignore money laundering, ignore narco trafficking, people will start to believe that these are normal activities, and that somebody in the law enforcement agency will just look away. And this is what we're saying again, that the tolerance of these crimes, planes landing in Netherlands, who brings in the planes? These are not random flying around. People in Guyana on the ground, bring them, provide refueling facilities, um, and dispose of the goods that they're bringing to the country. And there must be people in the law enforcement agencies who know what is taking place in the criminal world of tracking, bribery, extrajudicial killing, gold smuggling, gun running, laundering, and drug trafficking. These are once again becoming norm everyday activities. And my friend examined the almost everyday killing of innocent people during the disturbances. These were terrorists. These were people who trained abroad, not in electrical wiring. These people were trained abroad to make bombs, and they came back and they killed people. Don't let us mince words about what took place in the disturbances. Similarly, to troubles, we know that rogue policemen were employed to protect drug traffickers. And of course, there were numerous massacres, and it is difficult to discover, you know, um, how those killings took place, because many innocent victims themselves were being killed, and many of the people who know what occurred are not willing to speak, even in commissions of inquiry. Uh, as a result of it, there has been an erosion of confidence in the law enforcement agency, because right-minded, right-thinking citizens are convinced that elements of law enforcement agencies have to know about these crimes. And once you hear about shooting a dark or Hasling, there's great distrust in police ability to investigate and bring the perpetrators to justice. I would like to say, my friends, that during the administration of the APNU PFC between 2015 and 20, we took several measures, but let me mention now two positive measures that uh, we introduced. The first, security sector reform plan. You remember that since about 1989, the British had attempted to introduce about a dozen security plans. You remember one president even invited Bernard Carrick to come to take charge of security in this country. Unfortunately, the he became a guest of the United States, what you call the, well, we call it jail in Ghana, but in America they call it a correctional facility. Um, but those British plans were never actually um, implemented. And one particular high commissioner actually signed an agreement only to have that agreement rescinded by the PPP administration under some pretext. So even though prominent leaders in the PPP were meeting prominent members of the British Metropolitan Police and even ministers of the government, no plan to reform police was ever introduced. It had to wait until the 8th NUFC coalition went into government and we had a real security sector reform plan. And that is what we did. And we were able to bring the level of criminality down. You check the records, extra police, extrajudicial killings, all those the heavy narco trafficking, all these things were reduced, piracy were reduced under the APN AFC coalition. Ghana was a stable place at that time. The other important plan that we introduced, not considered, introduced, was the social cohesion action plan. You know, you can talk about social cohesion, um, but we actually had a plan. We actually had a minister and a ministry which was dedicated to social cohesion. And you remember the draft of the opposition um, in Parliament saying social cohesion is a farce. Now, the PPP administration thought that the security sector reform was a farce. The PPP administration felt that social cohesion was a farce. So the two important measures that were introduced by the APN EFC Commission were discarded and rejected by the PPP after August 2020. So let us look at what APN EFC attempted to achieve. Let us again bring it bring the program down to 5 points because civil violence, I am convinced, could be eradicated if these five uh, principles of the problem are implemented, are accepted and implemented. First is ensuring equal access to education, and this would help to achieve greater quality and improvement. And you know, my friend, we put a lot of effort in getting children to school. Every major road in Guyana had school boats. Every major road they had school buses. Individual school children were given bicycles um, because access to school, access to education was our top priority. The second principle is eliminating income disparity caused by extreme poverty. And true, we did not have access to petroleum revenue, um, which the present administration uh, has been spending very liberally. Um, but with the little we have, we improved pension for poor people. We improved the wages of people cleaners, people who were getting, $28,000 a month. Ended up getting double that. Um, pensioners who in the ninth parliament were getting 7,500 were getting over 22,000. They deserve more. We did not have more to give, but we felt that reducing or removing those income disparities caused by extreme poverty was a step in the right direction. Um, we also aimed at enhancing social protection and reducing employment. That's why we embarked on schemes like FLED, um, the Sustained Diversity and Entrepreneur Development Program, and HEYS, Hinterland Empowerment Youth Service, and the Guyana Youth Corps. Uh, Both we embrace inclusivity at the political and social level. And this is why you need uh, a dynamic ministry. And we had a dynamic ministry that promoted social cohesion. You don't need these programs to implement themselves. You had to have a ministry, you had to have public servants who were aiming to improve and enhance inclusivity. And we moved towards eradicating inequality in its first forms. This is inequality between the rich and poor and between coastal and hinterland. And that's one of the reasons why it created for hinterland towns. APMC did that so that the towns would become real hubs for regional development. Those towns now have mayors and town councils, and they're providing municipal services in those regions. The regions now have capitals. So the gap between coastal and hinterland, I like to say that the Eagle River sort of divides the hinterland in the west from the rest of Ghana. But that gap was being closed when we were in office. And of course, between rural and urban areas. And one of the means that we employed to close the gap is by having regular local government elections. When we entered office in 2015, we were able to have local government elections in 10 months. The PPP has already been in office for over 2.5 years, and they can't manage that local government elections. Okay, the FPNU, the AFC did not perform well, but the law, the constitution calls for government elections, and we obeyed the law. That is historical fact. And the PPP has been in government for 30 months now, and they can't have one local government election. We had two local government elections during our term of office. So these were important elements in ensuring that uh, social cohesion functioned. It was not just a slogan, put on a fancy polo shirt and have a rally. We were making cohesion work. Civil violence will be reduced by enforcing the law fairly but firmly. There are laws, Public Order Act, the Human Rights Act, Police Complaints Authority Act, and you make these laws work to suppress uh, or eliminate violence. We can also eliminate violence by enforcing those two plans or implementing those two plans, the Security Sector Reform Action Plan and the Social Cohesion Action Plan. We have seen over the years how people have resorted to civil violence. For over 70 years, we have seen how people resorted to civil violence. We have to grow up as a nation. We have to stop that. The central government must revise the program to enable people to work together. The central government prepared that relation by reestablishing organizations like the Department of Social Cohesion and adopting and implementing the Security Sector Reform Plan. The central government has a duty to restore trust in the law enforcement agency and to rebuild the basis for creating a moral community so that we can collaborate with each other. My friends, it is possible for Guyana to be a peaceful society. It is possible to eliminate or to eradicate civil violence. We are a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious country, and we always will be. We always will be. That diversity a liability, it's an asset. We must reject civil violence, and we must continue to search for the means of building a safe society so that social cohesion could become an important ingredient to building the Guyanese nation. We were on our way to that destination between 2015 and 2020, and we must now resume that journey to building Guyana without violence by ensuring there's greater social cohesion and the law enforcement agencies are reformed so that they enforce the law, protect vulnerable citizens, and prevent disorder. Thank you, and may God